I want to bring in now on the phone the mayor of San Juan, Puerto Rico, Carmen Yulín Cruz. Mayor, thank you for joining the show. And I think our phone line is connected okay, right?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Perfect. So, Mayor, let me start with a couple of questions for you. I want to get your reaction to that new reporting indicating that the Trump administration has taken about $10 million from the FEMA budget, moved it over to ICE.
You know, we have a saying in Puerto Rico, it's that you undress a saint to dress another one. And what he did is take money from a life-saving organization like FEMA, or at least that's what it should be, and put it in the hands of a life-tearing and family-tearing organization, because that's what certainly ICE has been doing in the especially in the border at the United States, just tearing families apart. And it goes to tell you where President's priorities are. They're not in ensuring that families are together. They're not in ensuring that neglect does not end in the death of people, as it did in Puerto Rico with about 3,000 people dead. They are in ensuring that whatever he thinks is right just gets pushed through without any total disregard for people's lives and the impact that this will have on them. This is what happened in Irma and Maria. Actually, most of the policies got changed. Usually, municipalities like the mayor of Myrtle Beach was just speaking would just write a letter saying, "This is how much I have already expend on getting ready for the storm," and they usually give you a 50% reimbursement. That changed in Puerto Rico. It didn't happen for Maria, so that really curtailed the ability of many municipalities around Puerto Rico to perform life-saving activities.
Well, let me ask you two questions about that, because the president is talking about that storm, as you know, over the last 24 hours, the one that hit your area, San Juan and Puerto Rico. And the president tweeted this morning, specifically targeting you, Mayor, as I'm sure you've seen. He said, "We got A+ for our recent hurricane work in Texas and Florida and did an unappreciated great job in Puerto Rico, even though an inaccessible island with very poor electricity and a totally incompetent mayor of San Juan. We are ready for the big one that is coming." What went through your mind when you saw the president tweet that?
Well, you know, oops, he did it again. Here he goes again. You know, he doesn't understand that this isn't about him and about his ego. This is about the inability of his administration that he directs to ensure that the appropriate help got to Puerto Rico in time. This is about his administration telling the Puerto Rico Power Authority that we cannot buy generators or light poles from countries outside of the U.S., even countries that the U.S. buys these services and materials from. So, you know, the president is all about political posturing. It's all about how good he's going to look. And I hope, for everybody's sake and for the sake of lives being saved in North and South Carolina, that FEMA has learned their lessons, that the president has learned their lessons, and that he goes to these states not to throw paper towels, not to point fingers at who is in a humanitarian crisis doing everything they can, but to do his job as commander-in-chief and ensure that help gets there. That is what we can hope. 3,000 people died because we didn't have electricity in time. And look, our own government have some responsibility.
So that's what I actually wanted to ask you about. And I don't want to interrupt, Mayor, but this brings me to the next question, because you brought up FEMA. You brought up some of the issues that FEMA had in Puerto Rico responding to that storm. Brock Long, the FEMA administrator, was out this morning, and because of the president's comments on Puerto Rico, he was defending the administration. And I want to play you what Brock Long had to say. Here's what he said.
Sure.
We faced a crumbling infrastructure. It was rotted and decayed, and FEMA can't help that. We have to deal with the deck of cards that we've been dealt.
Mayor, does he bring up a fair point? Do you bear some responsibility for the response to Maria?
Well, it is true. There was a crumbling infrastructure, but that has nothing to do with not providing the number of tarps that needed to be provided. That has nothing to do with, look, 97% of the people that asked for funeral relief aid in Puerto Rico, FEMA has denied them, even though they have admitted, and Brooke Long himself has admitted in congressional hearings, that it took them longer, that they had problems getting off the ground. Well, if you're in the emergency management system and it takes you time to get off the ground, you're admitting to your own negligence. Now, did we do a lot of damage before in terms of a crime? It's like telling somebody that is in a building, that is an old building, that catches fire, that it's their fault because they didn't run fast enough. The truth of the matter is that reports, independent reports from George Washington University, from Harvard University, have said that the majority of the people died from the botched effort. And I have to say, unfortunately, that the majority of the Puerto Rican political class decided to be silent when we all knew that we were dying and that the bureaucracy and inefficiency of the federal government, aided by the neglect, the structured neglect, that being a colony of the United States or a territory of the United States provides, allowed President Trump to look the other way. He has not tweeted once to say he's sorry about the deaths of Puerto Rico, but he has time to tweet at little old me.
Mayor of San Juan, Carmen Yulin Cruz, joining us on the show this morning. Mayor, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining the program to talk about the president's tweets and the response from the federal government. Thank you. Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. Why don't you subscribe? It's really easy. Just click on that button down there. And for more news from MSNBC, click on any of these videos here for the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more videos from MSNBC with our newsletters. Head over to msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up.